of the South African Union of Students expressing concern at the university's alleged intention to suspend the SRC of Sefako Makgatho University, I beg your pardon. And this is after students decided to take strike action against the ongoing challenges with NSFAS, widespread protest action at the country's universities, where some students were financially excluded while waiting for funding from the national scheme or not allowed to register for the academic year due to historic debt. Let's make sense of all of this for you now. Bring in the South African Union of Students spokesperson, Asive Dlanjwa, who joins us via our video link. As always, great to have you on the program, sir. Thanks very much indeed for making time. You know, it's very interesting how universities typically respond to student protests, despite the fact that these aren't new. But as a start, let's speak about this particular case. What do you know about where those protests are and what students' intentions are going forward?
Good morning, Brian, and also to your viewers and listeners. Always a pleasure being here. Currently, what we know, also this morning, I also spoke with the SRC president, is that the payments, the bulk of the payments for the majority of the students who had not received those payments, which led to the strikes, the payments we're speaking about as student allowances, in particular food allowances. They have since begun to receive those from last night, and the majority of them have received them up until now, which most likely then, so that would be the first thing. The second thing is that, unfortunately, the student leaders are still suspended. They have not yet, their suspension has not yet been lifted, as we had made a call to the institution, although we will be meeting with the university either on Monday or on Tuesday. Except for that expansion, suspensions, we do not think the strike will carry on into Monday. Obviously, it had stopped, it had stopped due to the Easter. So we don't think that will carry on, unless obviously the students would carry on in solidarity with their leaders who have since been suspended and are being victimized by the university management.
Yeah. And, you know, I wonder whether you reckon we're getting any better at having this dance, as some people refer to it. You know, it's almost like clockwork. The year begins, NSFAS has delays in the payment of some of the funding. It leads to student protests. Certain people are suspended, and then you rinse and repeat. Given the fact that we've seen an iteration of this kind of series of events, do you reckon we're getting any better at dealing with what's now even predictable, if not completely expected?
You see, the challenges that we are dealing with in the sector are probably at most or broadly twofold. At the first level, and I will show you why it leads to this protest, at the first level is the level of coordinating the sector. I think we have to at some point concede to the fact that the current setup of the sector is not efficient, and it does not allow, or maybe there's not even a will from the level of the department to coordinate the sector. Because some of the issues are around the issue of coordination. Let me give you an example, for instance, using Sefako Makgatho. When we met with the department in NSFAS in the first, I think it was the first week of February, if I'm not mistaken, we raised the issue of Sefako Makgatho that their classes had already begun in the second week of January, since it's the health sciences institution and campus. So that they were already in class, let them receive allowances. Now, so what you find is that between the department, NSFAS, and institution, there's no coordination or coherence. So you will have an institution beginning its programs while the department has not ensured that there's congruence between the timelines of the university and those of NSFAS. Then you will find NSFAS only coming to the party 2-3 months down the line. And obviously it will cause a pandemonium at the level of the institutions, because funds have not been there. There's no money for food, there's no money for accommodation, there's no money for learning materials. So if we could coordinate the sector better and the sector can become coherent and congruent, then majority, I can tell you for a fact that 95% of this protest would dissipate. Because for that matter, in any case, the majority of the protest have nothing to do with the lack of funding or the lack of resources. Resources have been dispersed, taxpayers are paid, but there is lack of leadership and coordination. So that's at the first level that causes strikes. Because, for instance, the students that we are speaking about now, they had to take to the streets for them to receive allocations that were due to them in any case.
Right.
So it had nothing to do with funds. The second level, unfortunately, in most institutions, we are led by buffoons who are masquerading as intellectuals. You see, the accumulation or the acquisition of a PhD, unfortunately, does not inherently give one the necessary requisite ability to lead people. And this is what we are finding in institutions of higher learning, that these professors, they embody a lot of buffoonery and they are not leaders. They can't lead such a sector of society. Because take, for instance, this protest. The students of SMU, since January, they have written every letter you can think of almost every week. They have made calls almost every week. They have been to meetings. They've even gone down to Cape Town on their own volition without the support of the management to go meet with the officials at NSFAS to be able to deal with this, which is something that was not supposed to be done by the students in the first place. It was supposed to be done by the university through their financial aid office. Yeah. They did not do it. So it would take all of these, and these, instead of the university expediting their intervention, they suspend the students based on a protest when the students have exhausted all forms of recourse, instead of sitting down and ensuring that they reach an amicable solution through reasonable means and negotiation, sure, and not through victimizing and beating up students.
I think everybody involved will agree that it's completely regrettable that the situation gets to a point where students even need to protest for, as you mentioned, what is rightfully theirs. That said, though, I think there are some people who are going to look at this and say, let's face it, the students sometimes in their protest don't come out of this smelling like a bed of roses. I mean, the ongoing critique has always been the way in which they raise their concerns, the form that the protests take, and sometimes the kind of disruption and damage that it comes with.
Students are peaceful. Students have always been peaceful, and they engage themselves in a peaceful manner when they protest all the time. Is there sometimes a criminal element that creep up and opportunistically use the plights of the students to advance their criminal interest? Yes, those happen. But in most cases, it's not students. The criminal element comes in two areas. The first, the first level at which creates a precipitation for such criminal activities to enter is the violence that is always 100% of the time. I can tell you this without any doubt. It is a violence that is often instigated and meted out against students by private security, who majority of them, by the way, don't even have name tags. Some of them don't even speak any South African language, who beat up on students, as you would have seen the videos in Sefako Makgatho. You can go to any student protest. This is what the universities have been doing. They hire thuggish, bogus private security, beat up on the students, and the students, in retaliation, sometimes, or in defense, there can be an opportunity that creeps in for criminal activities to enter that strike. We carry on, and we will always condemn violence in the strongest possible term, and the destruction of property. We even condemn the burning even of one paper. We say there is no room for violence and for the destruction of property and defacing of property in the name of our plight and the name of our struggles. However, unfortunately, because we are dealing, as I've said, with buffoons and thugs who, by the way, milk the university through this private security. Some of them pay up to 500,000 rands per day on these private securities. So it is them who instigate violence against our students. It used to be the police, and we dealt with this thing very harshly with government, and it is now no longer the police, it's private security. And then the second level, obviously, we do not deny that sometimes there will be external criminal influence that might be opportunistic of the situation. But I can tell you, our students are not violent. They have not been violent. You can take Sefako Makgatho, for instance. Now, there was the only violence there is the violence that was meted out against them, and so it was not from the students' side. But where there's been destruction of property in the name of our struggle, bastardizing our struggle. We condemn that in the strongest possible terms. And we say our students must work with law enforcement to root out those criminal elements. Those people don't deserve to be in institutions of higher learning. They must go to prison where they belong, if any of them would be involved in such acts.
It's good to hear you being so unequivocal in your condemnation of the violence that sometimes creeps into universities. But I think it's a bit disingenuous for you to expect us to believe that there is no student involvement whatsoever, even if it's off the back of students bandwagging these criminal elements that you speak of. I mean, we have seen videos where, yes, the students might have not started it, but some of them certainly join in, and that's what gives it the momentum.
You are sensational as the media, generally speaking. You thrive on sensationalism. You know why? Because there will be 100 protests happening or in our institutions of higher learning. There will be a single institution where these criminal activities will happen, and you get onto that bandwagon. You tell me now, this year, we have had protests almost in all institutions of our higher learning. Tell me where our students destroyed property. So it is wrong for the media to create an impression that at the end of the day, the sum total or aggregate conclusion of a student protest is that it leads to violence and destruction of property. It's like anything in the world. It's like anything in the country. Student protests, I maintain, our students are not violent. They are not violent in their manner. You can go throughout the student protests that we have had this year, the previous year. There has not been violence. So I maintain, we're not going to take isolated incidents of criminals and say that our students are violent. So it is just unfortunate, the sensationalism that is driven by journalists and by the media. But our students are not violent. Absolutely not.
Please don't misquote me. At no stage did I say that. So if there's going to be a constructive discussion, I think we need to be fair on that stage. We have been with students in some instances, and I agree with you. The majority of people who are part of those protests actually have very genuine concerns. And in fact, in many instances, it's a pity that there are isolated moments that take away from that. I don't think anybody can deny that. What I have a challenge with is the fact that you are also simultaneously trying to paint a picture that there is zero involvement of some students in what typically becomes violent action. That too, you have to admit, is not true.
No. This is what I'm saying. And I must also clarify, when I say you are sensational, not necessarily you, Ayanda, it's you, journalists. I have had countless interviews with journalists, and often their first question they ask me is violence. And I ask myself,
and of course, and there's nuance, right? And that's what I'm appealing to you to speak about now, right? It's never really
at that level of nuance. This is why I'm saying, Ayanda, this is why I'm saying that. At the level where there has been opportunism, I even said that if there are those, in our view, by the way, this is why I even say to you, if they are anywhere within our protest, our students must be able to identify them. They do not belong in institutions of higher learning, and they do not belong, they are not students in the sense that they do not embody themselves in the culture in which we have embodied ourselves in. And I cannot call them students, or I cannot paint the picture and create an impression that students inherently are violent. Because this is the picture that is, and the narrative that is being narrated broadly by the media and people that are not interested in our struggle. I will forever maintain that there are isolated incidents of criminality that can be opportunistic. But as far as the students' protests are concerned, I will maintain this is from the times of Fees Must Fall. What I'm speaking about, but is not something that I have seen now. The violence has always been limited to a few criminal elements within the student community. By the way, criminal elements exist everywhere. Criminal elements exist at home. Criminal elements exist in the police. They exist with the lawyers. They exist with the church. So it is obviously unreasonable for one to assume that within the strata of students there will not be some criminal. There will be criminal elements. But to create an impression that student protests lead to violence, and the destruction of property, we are going to condemn that, because 99% of the time our students are not found wanting. It is institutions of higher learning that are found wanting, and the majority of our protests, they are very peaceful.
All right. Yeah. Look, I think anybody who tries to characterize these student protests as being inherently violent is also being unfair. So I think that concession can certainly be made. But simultaneously, I think there's a discussion that needs to take place among students about how you root out those elements you speak of, which you and I agree do exist within the student community. Asive, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. It's an ongoing discussion. I imagine we'll have another chat about it. Hopefully, we get better at sorting out some of these issues. Asive Dlanjwa is the spokesperson of the South African Union of Students.